I'm really excited to hear what Carl's going to bring to us about buyer scripts and consultations. He's ready for you to ask him all the questions. He's happy to share his slides afterwards, so I can email those out to you all, no problem, as well as the recording once we've processed everything. So Carl, if you want to take it away.
Absolutely. Hi, everybody. How are you? Carl Batiste, KW over in Los Gatos. So I want to talk to you because this is a class that I actually teach at a bigger level. So I'm kind of breaking this down so that we have a more reasonable timetable. And so even though I have here, the navigation is navigating buyer urgency, setting the stage for success. I have about three slides that I'm really going to focus on, but we can have a conversation around a greater percentage of the buyer transaction. We can take this wherever you want to go. And the reason why I opted for navigating buyer urgency is mostly because obviously right now we're in a crazy market, no doubt, where buyers are really challenged into getting homes. And even if the market shifts in the direction of more inventory, there has to be quite a bit of inventory that would pop on the market at 3% interest for us to saturate the market with inventory or buyers. So a little bit about my background. I spent 22 years in consumer packaged goods. I worked for Colgate-Palmolive, SC Johnson, and Del Monte Foods for 22 years. And then I decided that I wanted to be a realtor. And so I quit my job, walked off the set literally, and started door knocking. I door knocked for 4 hours a day, every single day. And I took #1 market share. I was really ready to make this thing happen. And I don't know how many of you can type in the chat box if you want, how many of you have been in the business were in the business in 2007 through 10. If so, you'll remember how crazy nuts that market was. I always tell people, because that was our big short sale and craziness era. I always tell people that, the average days on the market was so great then that you had to treat the for sale post with stuff for termites because the post was in the ground so long. Anyway, you remember that window of time was nuts. So I got into real estate at that point, and it's been a great ride since 2006. I've run offices. I own some offices. I teach, I coach, I have a team. So I do a lot of fun things. And so when Doug asked me and Therese asked me if I would work with the board, I was like, yeah, totally. I'd love to teach. So take me off task for a while. It's fun. So anyway, let's move on to the first piece of this. I really am a believer that any consultation we have with a buyer, or a seller for that matter, really needs to start with a fact find. And I think sometimes we talk too much and we don't ask enough questions in our business. And unfortunately, when we talk more than we ask or listen, we don't really uncover the most important pieces that are relevant to a buyer's transaction. So I always start with ask powerful questions. So if you're taking notes at all, I always like to reference it this way. When you ask great questions, you should be scuba diving, meaning you should go really deep and get really, really detailed with a buyer so you understand where things are at. If you are, in fact, not going to go deep, then you kind of snorkel. And when you snorkel, you're kind of on top of the water, kind of looking down. And of course, that's, not as efficient and is not as effective as going deep. So let's talk a little bit about some of the powerful questions. However, before we get into that, I have ask on here, because when we ask questions, we get to learn about a buyer's motivation or a seller's. Today's mostly about buyers. And when we tell, we should only be telling when it's our area of expertise. Meaning, when I talk to a buyer, my area of expertise is the market. I know what's going on in the market. I know what's going on with comps. I know what's going on with lending. So when I tell, it should be my area of expertise. When I'm asking, I'm seeking to understand what's going on in the buyer's head. So just make a mental note of that, because sometimes as agents, we're so excited about getting in front of somebody that we oftentimes don't slow down to speed up, right? We just go for it like a mad dash. Okay, so some powerful questions that we can ask in a consultation. Tell me about your decision to buy. Now, notice that I didn't say, so you want to buy a house, right? Because then that turns into what? A yes or a no, or a yes, I do. Then you got to go further. So when I say, tell me about your decision to buy, if I were sitting in front of Malia, for example, then Malia could say, well, we're in a process of relocating and da, 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 da. So I get some information about who she is, what she's doing, why she's doing it, what her timing looks like, what her flexibility is like or not. Then the second question you can ask is, are you currently working with another agent? And I put 5 stars next to it because if you've been in the business at all for a while, you know exactly why there's 5 stars next to that question. Part of it is because we don't want to be double downing, right? Our time when somebody else is shopping other agents. So at this point, this is what I'd like to do. How many of you ever had a situation where a buyer says to you, well, you know, we're working with 2 or 3 agents and the person that can find us the house first, you know, we'll work with. If somebody would, if you would, just so that I know you're there, because I know we don't have everybody's face here. So if you could use the chat box, how many of you have ever had that where somebody said that they're working with somebody and they're working with 2 or 3 people and the person that's the best agent they'll work with? Okay, so we know that that happens, right? So here's one of the scripts, Cindy and Christy, that I offer. I'll say, so let's just say it, I'm talking to Cindy. I'll say, Cindy, I can certainly appreciate it, right? I always want to validate how Cindy feels, right? I don't want to knock her off her chair and say, well, I'm not working with you because, right? So my job would be, Cindy, I can appreciate it. Sounds like to me, you're really interested in finding the person that's going to be dedicated and committed to finding you a home. Is that right? And of course, Cindy will probably say yes. Then I'm going to say, hey, Cindy, do you know how we get paid? And if Cindy says, well, not really, or I know you get paid commission or whatever, I'm going to go in at that point and say, yep, you're right. And yet I don't get paid until the home closes, which means that we put a lot of back end work in order to find that perfect house. And that's every agent, no matter who you work with. We're not paid until the home closes escrow. And the reason why I bring it up, Cindy, is because if you're working with 3 people, the question I would ask you is, how dedicated do you think 3 agents are going to be to finding you the perfect home if they all know that they're just 1 out of 3 that could potentially get paid? In other words, I got a 33% chance of getting paid. And with Christy, I have 110% of her dedication. So I'm 110% dedicated back. Cindy, what I'm worried about if you go that route is you'll have 3 agents that'll put 33% effort into getting paid. And I hate to see you do that. I would rather see you be super committed to one person who is really going to put their efforts out there to get you the right home. Cindy, buying a home is probably your single most important asset that you probably ever will purchase. And this is the time to make sure that you put all of your eggs in one basket and that you focus really heavily on the right person that can get the job done for you. Does that make sense? And if Cindy says, yeah, you know, Carl, I guess you're right. My goal then would be to get her to work with me and perhaps sign a buyer broker agreement with me. Now, if Cindy insists on working with 3 agents and says, you know, Carl, I appreciate all that. You're a nice guy and da 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 da. I get it. You know the market. I still want to work with 3 agents. if that's the case, I'm going to tell you what I do. I very, very professionally get up and I'll hand Cindy my card and I'll shake Cindy's hand and I'll say, Cindy, thank you so much for your time today. Unfortunately, how you would like to operate doesn't match my business style. And so we're not a match. However, good luck. And if there's something I can do to help you, please call me. 8 times out of 10, I've had people say, no, sit down. We do want to work with you. And the reason I do that is because I never want to put my position as an agent below the client to the point where I feel like I'm desperate for Cindy's business. If I have a pipeline that's this big, right, and I have a lot of people that I'm closing, then I don't have to worry so much about Cindy's escrow, correct? Wouldn't it be great, everybody, if we could just pick who we want to work with? Oftentimes we don't get to because we don't have enough leads or whatever. However, if we were really good lead generators at a high level and we could say, you know what, these are bottom feeder people, and I don't mean to say that in a negative way, you know what I mean, tire kickers, people that really aren't serious. If I wanted to pick my clientele, how awesome would that be that I could work with who I choose to work with? And so my goal for you guys would be that you become so proficient at the scripts that you're able to pick somebody and to literally have a discussion like this to say, we're not a fit. I don't think this is a match, and we move on. And it's a nice way of firing somebody. We've all probably fired a seller before, or we fired a buyer before. And it feels good when you actually get to do that, when you don't want to choose to work with somebody. Now, if Cindy says, you know what, Carl, this makes sense. This is an important decision. I didn't realize at all that this is how this works. And I definitely don't want to be somebody that gets 33% attention, because I know that you're going to give Christy more attention because Christy's dedicated to your service, right? Any questions or comments on that? Jeff, looks like Jeff's typed something in here. Yeah, that's exactly correct, right? Buyers must qualify in order to earn upfront our time. However, it's interesting, Jeff, if us as agents if we don't have a perspective on our own business that's really, really confident, then we tend to be the type of agent that will take whatever we can get. We don't want to be in that space because, just like you said, and we all know this is a market right now where if I agree to work with you, I could be spending a boatload of my time, Jeff, entertaining offer after offer after offer after offer. And if you're semi-committed or you're kind of not really committed, and I could have, somebody else here, who else do we have in the room? CBMM wants my attention, then I could work with CBMM and I could close an escrow. So Jeff, thanks for the comment. Anybody else? And feel free to voice it as well. I don't want to be the only person on the hot seat. Just kidding.
And if you guys want to change your names, this is Jody. Sorry, I'm back. Sorry about that, everyone. Okay. So thanks for being here, Carl. But yeah, if you want to change your names so that we can see who's there. I see Darkus is here, Cindy, Christy, but CBMM, if you want to tell us who you are, I can change your name for you if you don't know.
CBMM says they love this, so good. Thanks, CBMM. Awesome. Anybody else, any comments before we get off of are you currently working with an agent? We want to ask that question. I want to share actually, it's a funny story now. It wasn't the day this happened. I was new, right? I got my license, and I think we've all been in a place like this where you just want the client, right? So I finished my open house on a Sunday. I'm exhausted, tired, worked all week, open house on Saturday, showed property all Saturday, right? Flyered on Sunday, did an open house on Sunday. I just wanted to go home. And somebody came into the open house and they said, we would like to look at a couple of properties. And of course, I didn't have anything in escrow. So I was brand new and I was like, oh, great. Give me 10 minutes. I'll run home, and I printed stuff out and I went ahead and took them out. And I actually had them in with me that day in the car, and I printed off the stuff that they were looking at. And we're driving down the road, and some of you may have been here before, hopefully not. The husband said, let's take a look at the one on whatever street, Crandall Street. And then the wife says, no, we don't want to look at that one. Remember, our agent showed us that last weekend. And I'm thinking, okay, stop the car, open the door, and push them out. I didn't do that, obviously. I learned a lesson, though. I learned a lesson that I was playing Uber driver or cab driver for somebody that was wasting my time because they were working with somebody else. So it's always important to make sure that you take a stand for your commission and you take a stand for your own value. And that's why we ask, are you currently working with an agent? And don't be afraid at that point to talk about buyer-broker agreement. And some people say, well, that makes me a little uncomfortable to talk about that. And this is the time to talk about it, right? And I would say, hey, Jeff, I just want you to know that working with a buyer for us is just like taking a listing. When I take a listing, the seller signs an offer, signs a listing agreement with me, and I represent them as a listing agent. And I do the same things with my buyer. I have you sign a listing agent for buyers, so to speak. And that way you know that I'm 110% dedicated to finding you the right property. And I know that you're dedicated to me. And in the end, Jeff, if you and I are not a match, I don't have any problem releasing you from it because we won't have fun together anyway. And yet I will tell you this, I will tell you that I've never had a buyer break up with me, and they laugh. You have to kind of make it a little bit fun too, right? So Jeff says, this is why we need to have an initial consultation before invest. Absolutely. Don't invest, don't get on the phone with somebody and then just start showing property, because what happens is they have the upper hand. This consultation, these questions are so critically important. So then the next question would be, will you be paying cash or financing? Well, I want to know that for a couple of reasons. I want to know that because if they are actually paying cash, then it could, not always, it could potentially put them in a better striking range for a property. Now, it doesn't always, right? Sometimes when people say, well, cash is king. Yeah, cash is king because you can take it and go right to the store and buy something with it. However, in a world where financing is strong, and I've got a 760 or an 800 credit score, and I've got, 60% down, I'm a slam dunk loan. That loan turns into cash in 21 days or 30 days. I'm as good as cash, other than the fact that my document is white with ink on it instead of green, right? I can close it. So I think it's important to make sure your buyers that are cash understand that well-qualified people can write at a higher price point and get the offer taken because it turns into cash in 21 to 30 days. Now it's different if you've got somebody who's borderline and their file is really a crazy file in order to get approved. So again, important to ask the question. And if they say, well, I'm financing, that leads the next question, which is, have you been pre-approved by a lender yet? The other thing is you don't want to be running somebody out there who says they want to buy a house. Well, if they want to buy a house, a lender might tell them they can't buy a house. And meanwhile, you've taken them into property. Or they can buy a house. However, the property has to be about $200,000 or $300,000 less than the homes they think they can buy. So again, this is that pre-qualification of smart questions, powerful questions up front. And if somebody says, well, we haven't yet, we'll get pre-approved when we find something, and we've all had that happen before, this is a great opportunity for us to say, yeah, I can appreciate that, right? You'd want to kind of do that at that point in time. Let me offer you a suggestion, Shakira. In this market right now, we find that homes are going like like in 25 minutes. You're not going to have time to look at a house and go have a lender pull all that information for you. You're going to be putting yourself at a disadvantage to the other buyers in the marketplace that are ready to go right now. And that's that buyer urgency. And when people say, if people start to feel like some of your scripts or your answers to the questions feel pushy, this is my line all the time. I will say, hey, Jody, you know what? I understand. Please don't mistaken my passion for push. I do this job because I love what I do. And I am as excited as you are when I find a home for my client. So my job and my passion is for you to win the house that you desire to have. So please don't mistake my passion for push. And I love that because later on, we're going to talk about this again when we go write an offer. You want your client to know that you are very passionate about what you do. And it's okay, because the other end of that could be, I'm not passionate. I'm very slow to respond. And they don't like that either, especially if you have an agent or a buyer that wants to move. So we want to go ahead and get pre-approved. And Cindy, we want to do this because we want to put you in best striking position. When that house comes on the market and you say, oh my gosh, Carl, this is the house I need, we don't want to have to say, well, we need to go ahead and call Malia or Malia and have her, or Malia, and have her pre-approve you. And Malia's in Hawaii. And she says, well, I get you a letter later on tonight. And we all know that later on tonight, in some cases, is as good as next week in this market, right? So we want to make sure Cindy is in striking position. And those are power words, right? Cindy wants somebody that's going to get the job done. So again, don't mistake my passion for push. I'm real passionate about what I do. I love what I do. And my job is to get you to win the house you really desire.
And Carl, one of the other things
sure.
I think is happening with that question is, have you been pre-approved? Is some people won't even let you come see a house.
That's
unless you've been pre-approved.
100%. Right now, especially.
Yeah.
There's a comment, and I don't know if I have it on my screen, and I want to share it with you if I do. So give me 1 second. You'll laugh. You'll absolutely love this. If I can find it here.
And that, like, from personal experience, we're about to list my grandma's house, and we've already told the agent nobody comes into the house unless they've been pre-approved for multiple reasons. We don't want to waste their time, our time. And because of COVID, you want less people that are just looky-loos coming in.
Yeah, there's a total safety feature here, right? As well. Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to pull this up because I know you'll appreciate the humor of it when you see it. Have to do this, right? Okay. All right, now I'm going to stop this share and share the. Okay, can you see this?
Mm-hmm.
So they're sitting down and they're saying, the realtor says we have 880 showings tomorrow at 45-second intervals between 9 a.m. until 8 p.m. and all the offers are due at 8:05. There's like no time to get pre-approved in this window, right? At all. So I say that because it's important, and you're absolutely right. You want to make sure that, and most people today, if you look on the MLS, that you can't even get in, let alone the PED and everything else you have to have, right? So in a normal market, let's say we start to stabilize though, you want to make sure that that is what's available at this point in time, right? Okay, so tell me about your timing. This is important because you want to make sure that somebody's not saying we want to buy a house, however, we will buy the house when my kids graduate next June or this coming June. Will the market potentially be different in June than it is right now, March 31st? Right, so I could put a lot of backbone into creating something that may not necessarily be the case. So ask about timing. how quickly do you need to be in a home? We need to be in something fast. We need to be in something 6 months from now. That affects how you go to market. It also should affect how you manage your pipeline. So if I have a pipeline and Jeff wants to buy and be in a house by June 1st, I got to kick it up with Jeff. This is like primary time. If Jody's saying, you know, we're good until the end of August, Jody's probably not the person I'm taking out at 10 o'clock on Saturday morning right now. I need to make room for Jeff. Jeff says he doesn't see the humor in the joke. Well, it's kind of sarcastic humor, obviously, right? We all know how crazy it is in this marketplace. Okay, so the next question we would have here is, have you purchased a home before? Why do you think this might be an important question?
Have they gone through the process?
Yeah, have you done this before, or do I need to walk through 12 pages of stuff? Now, if they have gone through the process before, I always say, okay, so Jody, you know what? I know you've bought a house before. I'm going to take you through my presentation so you understand the process. And if it's something you know, let me know and we'll move forward. I just want to make sure, because the market changes so much, that I want to make sure that you're abreast what's going on currently. So it allows Jody to get a refresh of what's going on in the marketplace. I also know that Jody understands things like inspections and appraisals. And even if she hasn't bought a house in a while, she's been through that process before. Now, all of our favorite question, do you have to sell a home before you buy? Why is this a great question? You haven't passed Realtor 101 if you don't know why this is a good question, right?
Because you can't have a contingency.
Yeah, okay, yes, and what else? That's a good one. I love that. What else? I want the listing. If Christy tells me she's got to sell a house, I want that listing, and I want also to put Cindy or Christy in the house. Now, the contingency, I love that piece. And Jeff, you're say they may need the cash to buy. Let's talk about the contingency. How many people in this market will take a contingent upon sale? Probably not going to happen, right? Is it possible, though, if the market shifts into a buyer's market and the home's been on the market for 90 days and has taken a price reduction or two, and somebody comes in with a contingent offer, is it possible that that seller might be in a different space?
Yes, but that's rare in today's market.
Right, in today's market. However, if it shifts though,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, absolutely.
Right, then it changes the whole dynamic, right? And then Jeff, your point is very, very clear. They may need the cash to buy, right? So they may have nothing in the bank and everything is in that property. And so they need to have all of that cash in order to buy a home, right? So in that situation, somebody then in this market isn't the same striking range as somebody who's either cash or is non-contingent. And all of these are important because all these questions help to position you for where you end up taking this buyer, right? So what is important to you in the home buying process? So part of this is questions like, you understand how they communicate. You also get a real feel when you ask this question. And when you ask the question, just stop and let them talk. Because when you let people talk, lots of times you learn a whole lot about how they think about the process. So somebody might say something like, oh, you know what we're looking for? We're looking for this, and we want a pool, and we want a view, and we want that, and we want this, and we want this, and we want that. And we'd like that to all stay like under 2 million. And it's like, okay. Are we looking in Santa Rosa? Or are we looking? So in reality, you want to make sure there's a reality check there, right? This gives you the opportunity to see how well they understand the market. If it's about price versus amenities, it might not have anything to do with that, right? It might have something to do with neighborhoods, right? It might have something to do with Here's what I don't like in a real estate agent. And that's the next question. What's important to you in the agent that represents you? So these two we can couple together. It could be, I like somebody that's going to communicate with me every single day. You ever have a client that wants that every single day, even if nothing happens? I love the people where you put the house on the market and you have your first open house and you open it 1, it's 1:05, 1:10, and you get a text. Anybody come in the house yet? Right. And you know that if that's the case, this is going to be a fun 30 days, right? When they finally go pending. And then and if somebody sends an offer in and then you send a counter offer, then they'll text you. Did you hear anything back yet? Did you hear? And people do this all the time, right? And we understand that they have a sense of urgency under them. And yet, of course, I would text you if I heard back. Because you're the owner, right? You're the seller. So it's understanding how people want to be communicated with as well. There are some people that do not like text at all. They feel like when you text them, it's impersonal. I live on text and I love text because here's what I find. I find this, if you're my client, Jody, and you're a talker, and I see you're calling me and I got a back-to-back schedule, I know that Jody's question is going to be 20 minutes. If she texts me and says, I don't understand what this means in the inspection, and I answer it in a text, it's like over in 30 seconds to a minute, right? I love that piece. However, if Jody wants to talk to me, then I need to pick the phone up because Jody's my client. And I need to make sure that I treat her as the customer that deserves the #1 space in that moment of my day. Some people say, don't call me unless something's going on. That's okay too. I don't mind those people. I like those people as well. Some people only want to be talked to on Friday or on Wednesday, right? So understand what that looks like. That simple question could make all the difference between a trust relationship and a relationship of no trust. So you need to understand how your client wants to behave or wants you to behave in that dynamic. Any questions or comments on that at all? I know some of these feel a little bit elementary, and yet you learn a lot when you go through a list like this with people. We sometimes, I think it was you, Jeff, that made the comment, that's why we need to do this consultation. Because sometimes we race out and we don't know much about what we're even dealing with. We just know we have a fish on the line and we don't know whether it's, a shark or whether it's tuna at this point, right? So it's important that we understand who we have on the line. These two.
Carl, I have a
Yeah.
question.
Sure.
If this is an internet lead and you don't know them from Adam, would you conduct this kind of meeting prior to, or would you schedule like a Zoom or in-person meeting to go over this lengthy kind of material, or would you just jump into it?
So normally this is a sit down right here. I would do this at a coffee shop, or I'd do this in the office or wherever, right? However, your question is 100% valid. So if I have an internet lead, they either call off a sign or I have a Zillow lead come in or whatever it is that I buy, I would gauge where I take that based on the discussion. If you're talkative and you're open and you're really like, I feel like we got a good camaraderie, good rapport, I'm going to ask you as many questions as I can, and then I'm going to ask for an appointment. If you're answering questions, I know that you're probably amicable to have an appointment with me. If you, on the other hand, are very distant, very cold, non-committal, it kind of makes the whole process a little challenging. So I'm going to get as much information as I possibly can here first, because here's what I think. Chances are you might be the person that's talking to 3 or 4 other agents out there. My goal at this point is to make sure that, okay, she's a little distant, she's not committing. Certainly if I say, can we meet Wednesday at the Starbucks, she's not going to want to do that, or go on Zoom. So what I'm going to do is attempt to deliver the very, very best information that you want right now, so that as I am competing with potentially other people that you're talking to, I have the best answers. I don't know if that helps at all. So if you ask me some questions, in fact, if you're comfortable with it, will you role play that with me? Will you ask me the questions? Now you're saying, why did I ask him that, right? It's going to have me role play. Would you ask me a couple of the questions that you would say?
I'm sorry, what are you asking?
So I am going to, and who am I speaking with right
This
now?
is Christy
Okay,
Niemeyer.
Christy, so let's say I call you. Hey, Christy, you just hit my website and it looks like you either received a mailer or you're calling off one of our listing signs. How can I help you today?
Yeah, I wanted to see 123 Main Street. I was wondering if you could show it to me this afternoon.
Sure. And while I'm looking that property up so we can talk a little bit about it with you, have you been pre-approved by a lender?
Yes, I have.
Awesome. And how long have you been looking in the market?
I'm just starting.
Okay.
I haven't made any offers yet.
Awesome. And this area is the area kind of your choice?
Yeah, I'm kind of exploring a few different areas, but this one caught my eye because it's the style that I've been looking at.
Right.
I really like the location near the park and the school.
Sure. Do you know much about what's going on in the market right now from a buyer's end?
No, not really.
Yeah, it's super, super crazy. And I would love to chat with you more. And if you're pre-approved and are you in a position where if you walked into 123 Quaker Street today and you absolutely loved it, would you be in a position where you could write an offer on that property and make a move? Or do you have something?
Yeah, for sure. I'm totally ready to buy.
Okay, great. So let's break script for a second. Is Christy somebody that I'd probably want to ask for an appointment? Or at least meet her out the property and have, totally.
Yes.
Totally. Now, Christy, let's do the same thing. You're cold. You're a little cool with me though. Hey, Christy, this is Carl Batiste and I'm calling. It looks like you either hit my website off a listing or a flyer or something that we may have put out there. How can I assist you today?
I wanted to see if you could show me 123 Main Street. It just came on the market.
Yes, it did actually. While I'm pulling that up, do you mind if I ask you a couple questions?
No, that's fine.
So I love that because while I'm pulling that up can just mean I'm opening my folder or what it does, it gives me some space.
Got it.
Gives me space to ask Christy questions. Because if I feel like I have to jump right in, then I might start to fumble a little bit. If I say, that's great, while I pull that up, can I ask you a few questions? So use that script. So Christy, are you in a position to purchase a home immediately? Have you been pre-approved by a lender? Or do you have a set of guidelines or timelines that you have to adhere to at this point?
I haven't been pre-approved yet. I don't really want my credit run until, I find something that I really want or find something that I'm serious about. And so, yeah, I haven't been pre-approved yet.
Okay. So at this point, before we go any further, what's really important with Christy, because Christy could be my favorite buyer of the year, right? However, my real estate hat is turning 8 different colors: red, blue, green, orange, and black, because I have no idea if Christy makes $8 an hour In-N-Out Burger or if she is an executive with Chevron. I have no idea at this point. So I want to stay out of judgment. And yet I don't want to also create an environment where I now take 4 hours of my precious time for somebody who can't buy a house. So what do you think? I'm just going to ask, and you can type it in there if you like. Where would you take the next question?
Going into the market conditions and how we need to have all of our ducks in a row.
Yep. And before I do that, I'm going to validate Christy. Man, Christy, I can appreciate so much not wanting to have your credit run. It feels like every single time something gets run or ding, it goes down a point or 3 points. I can appreciate that 100%. However, I do have to let you know that in this market right now, we are seeing multiple offers and homes going pending so fast that if you're not pre-approved and you don't take that position, you kind of put yourself at a disadvantage versus your competition. So don't make this about you, right? Make it about the fact that she's competing with other people. Because if you make it like it's from you, she's going to look at you as if, oh, Carl's this ogre And I'm not going to do that ogre thing. So we make it like it's about the competition. So Christy, you put yourself at a disadvantage with all the other buyers that are actually out there today ready to pull the trigger. And I'll tell you, we have so many people that'll do whatever it takes to get a house. So my first recommendation to you would be you absolutely want to make sure you're pre-approved so that you've got that piece of paper. In fact, a lot of sellers today, listing agent won't even let you look at a property without having a pre-approval. In fact, now that I've pulled up 123 Main Street, we actually have to have that submitted before I can take you in. Let me ask you a quick question. Do you have a lender that you trust? Now what's my job?
Referral.
Get her pre-approved, right? And if Chris, so how are you going to answer that, Chris? Remember, you're kind of cool.
No, I haven't.
Don't be
I
too
haven't
nice
really
to me.
explored that yet.
Okay, I have 2 or 3 lenders that I work with all the time. We close 50, 60 transactions a year. Could I give your number to a couple of these folks? In fact, if I could, are you okay if I try to get Darkus on the line right now? See if you might be able to give you some basic information. And I don't have to stay on the line while you're sharing your, personal information with somebody. Just wondering if that might work for you.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so if she says, yeah, sure, man, that's pretty good. I'm going to get Darkus on the line and I'm going to say, hey, Darkus, I got somebody that needs to be pre-approved. I realize you need a bunch of documentation. I'm going to get off the phone, though, and have you talk with Christy. So I call Darkus, I patch him in. Hey, Darkus, meet Christy. Christy, I'm going to jet off the call. And then when Darkus tells me you're done, I'll give you a call back. Is that fair?
Sure, sounds good.
So now I literally have something in the works here on a telephone call. Oftentimes we're uncomfortable doing this because we're creatures of habit, and real estate agents don't like rejection and we don't like uncomfortable. And yet uncomfortable has to be the new comfortable, because here's what'll happen. If I don't take that and I say, oh, okay, Christy, what you need to do is get pre-approved and then we can take you out to look at property. And she's like, oh, okay, thanks, bye. And now she's clicking through another thing and she calls, who else do we got? I want to pick on somebody else. Is it Michael? Is that correct? It's CBDM, right? Okay, so Michael. So let's just say she calls Michael, and Michael goes through this entire process and gets her pre-approved. Then Michael gets the transaction. So don't snorkel with Christy, scuba dive. Because when I scuba dive with Christy, I may actually get her pre-approved and I just got a client. If I only snorkel and I hang up, I probably lost Christy at that point. Does that make sense? Now, if I scuba dive with Christy and she's like, you know what, dude? Like, I don't want to do this right now with you. What's the worst that can happen? NO. The worst that can happen is NO. And if she's this feisty and spicy now, what do you think she's going to look like for the next 6 Saturdays that we're out looking at property, right? So what I'm really suggesting here is that you ask questions, go layers deep so that I can understand how serious Christy really is, right? So does that help answer the question, Christy? If I feel like you're like really on it, I'm going to book the appointment. I'm going to show the property to you. If you're very non-committal though, I'm not going to go out and show property.
Yeah, I understand.
So I think the Zillow lead or whoever the lead is internet-wise depends a lot on how warm the lead is as a cold lead. If you can have a warm, cold lead, right? Okay. So anybody else on that? Okay, so these 2 questions I put in red, and I'll tell you why when I walk you through my box 1, box 2, box 3 crazy market script, and I'll share that with you. What are the 5 things that would make this house a 90% house for you? Why do we want to do 5 things? Because a lot of people will give us 10, 15 and 20, and you can't find all those things for everybody, right? And the other thing is, if I have 5 things that make a 90% house and Jeff gives me those and says, it has to have a pool, it has to have a big room so I can put a ping pong table or a pool table, it has to have a gourmet kitchen because we entertain a ton of people. Now, I know what those have to haves are, right? And when I hit all 5 of those specifics, correct, Jeff, I can search specifically, right? Number 1, so I don't waste time, mine or theirs. The other thing it does is, how many of you have ever put a drip campaign out to somebody and they send you a listing that didn't show up in the drip? And then you go pull it up and it's either not the same price, it has something that they said they didn't want, because people don't always follow directions, right? They tell you what they want and then they go out there and they start perusing and they come up with something else. So let's say Jeff texts me back and says, oh, Carl, we were on whatever site and we found this. And I'll say, yeah, the reason why it didn't pull in my feed, Jeff, because this house doesn't have a pool. So are you sure you really want to look at this? Because when you and I met at Pete's Coffee, a pool was a big deal for you. Has that changed? And then Jeff's like, no, you're right. Let's skip it. So when I have those 5 things that make a 90% house, I now have the criteria that Jeff set for me. I didn't set it for Jeff. Jeff set it for me. And so if Jeff falls in love with the office that has the wall to ceiling mahogany shelves, and that's not on his 5, and the kitchen is a small galley kitchen, and I say, hey, whoa, hang out a second. I know you love that front office, but man, you guys have you guys love gourmet cooking, and this kitchen is like half the size of a master bedroom. Do you want that? Oh, you know what? You're right. No, we don't. Or he might say, we've reconsidered. Yeah, we actually have reconsidered our top 5 now that we've looked at property. Is that okay? Of course it is, right? Because he's the one buying the house. So it gives me the opportunity to keep things in check. If after 4 homes, he decides that they don't really want a pool after all, as long as there's a community pool in the country club, that changes his desire. Now I can change that top 5. Okay, so I'm always in lockstep with Jeff as we're searching homes. And I can call him out by saying, yeah, this house doesn't have this. Are you sure you really want to look at that? Because my job is to help him find the home he wants. Now, the second question in red is this, and I say this at the consultation. Christy, I'm going to ask you 2 questions every time we walk into a house that fits your description, because the market's crazy. Number 1, I'm going to ask you if this is a 90% house. And if it's not, and you say, it's kind of a 60, 70, we're going to get right out of the house, because here's what I know. If you buy a house that you don't really love, the stuff that you don't like about it will get bigger and bigger and bigger every year that you're in that house. And I don't want to put you in a home, or I don't want you to put yourself in a home that you absolutely don't love. Okay. The second question I'm going to ask you is, if we find that perfect house, Christy, tomorrow, will you be prepared to make an offer? Now, if she says, wow, that's like so much to have to answer right away, what do? I go back to what? Remember, all this is during my consultation. Chris, you remember how I told you about the market?
Will you answer his questions?
What's that? Oh, okay. So what I'm going to say is, Chris, you remember how I told you how crazy the market is today?
Pepper, what if he asks you?
Are you talking in the class, or is this a different question somewhere else? Okay, I'm assuming.
I muted them, Carl, so
Okay,
I
no
think
worries.
we can continue.
I want to make sure I'm getting the question right. So, and then Christy says, yeah, I remember you explaining the market. Then I'm going to go back and say, so Christy, that's why I'm asking the question. I want to know, if you look at that house and you're like, I got to have it, that you're ready to write. Because what I know is, if 2 or 3 or 4 or 24 other people are ready to write, then you want to be in contention with those people. That's the only reason, Christy, I asked you that question. Remember, I'm not here to, don't mistake my passion for push. So now when I take Christy out the next day, we've had this whole fact find. And you know what, guys and gals, there's probably a handful of other questions you would ask in here too. I just wanted to put a few down so we could talk through these. When I actually have Jeff and or Christy out and we're looking at homes, and I say, Jeff, this is one that I pulled last night that I think you're going to fall on the floor with. I think you're going to love this room because you can have a pool table and a ping pong table in this room. It's so big. And so we get into the house and it's our 45 seconds to show the house, right? And I walk through and Jeff is like, you know what, Carl, I don't think we've seen anything at all that is close to this. So what are the two questions? So Jeff, remember when you and I sat at Pete's Coffee, there were two questions I told you I would ask you when we had our consultation. Do you remember what they are? He might remember, he might not remember. Now I'm going to say, is this a 90% house, Jeff? And Jeff says, yeah, it is. And then I'm going to say, okay, so we found the 90% house. Are you prepared to make an offer? Oh, that's right. I remember you telling me. So I want him to remember this because what I don't want to happen is I'm showing property to Jeff and I say, you ready to write an offer on it? And all of a sudden he feels like I just hit him in the head with a 2x4 because he wasn't expecting to be pushed into this now. Right? I set the stage for him a long time ago or earlier when we sat down. So he knew that those red questions were going to come up. Does that make sense? I was basically setting expectations so that when I find that perfect house, I can ask those questions fairly because I told him I was going to ask those questions. Is that good? Anybody? You can type yay, Y for yes, N for no, I need more info.
Yes, good.
Yes, thank you. Okay, good. Okay, great. Okay, so we've done the fact find. So now what happens is I get to the house that is 90%. And I say to Christy, we've got that. Here we are, 90% house. Christy goes, oh my gosh, 98% house. Great. Are you prepared to make an offer? Yes, we're ready to make an offer. I knew you were going to ask me that. We're ready to go. So I trained her, right? I trained Christy to be ready because what I don't want is Christy to miss out because there's 15 other people ready to write. Now, this could happen. And I know we've all been here before. No matter how good my consultation was, I say to Christy, are we ready to write on the house? And she's like, oh, I knew that you were going to ask me this. Is there any way that we can think about it? Right? We always get the think about it. Some people have funny scripts. I never use this, but I think it's funny. People say, well, if you sleep on it, you won't sleep in it. That's kind of a sarcastic one. I'd never say that. However, my comment might be, Christy, here's what I understand. Remember, validate. I understand how you feel. This is a gigantic decision. It's a big decision, and we're on a very accelerated timeline, which is unlike a normal market where you might have some time to think about it or even decide between a few homes. As you've seen, though, homes are going very, very quickly. What I don't want is for you to miss the opportunity to be a contender in this house in purchasing this home. Does that make sense? And make sure you close it out with that tie down. Here's why, because if I don't get an answer from her, I don't really know how she thinks. So when I say, does that make sense? What should I expect Chrissy to say?
Yes.
Yes, because if she says no, then I got a different problem. I'm going to say to her, so is this not, do you feel like maybe this isn't the 90% house? Or do you feel like you're not ready to purchase it? And then she's going to say, no. We need to move forward. So by your scuba diving, by asking the really deep questions, you're moving Christy from logic to emotion. Please write that down, because when people buy anything, we have logic makes us think, emotion makes us act. So remember that when you're in the Apple store and you say, I'm just going in, I'm not buying anything. And I always come out with something I need. And my wife's like, what do you need? It's like, don't ask questions. I've gone from logic to emotion. How many of you ever driven on a car lot? I'm just looking. And then 4 hours later, you're driving home with a new car, right? Whatever your thing is, right? We go from logic to emotion. So my job right now is to help Chris, not push her. My job is to help Christy navigate this crazy thought process. Because when she's in the middle of this process, no matter how logical she might be, this is not a logical market. Would you agree with that?
No, Carl, here's what I was going to say about that. There's always, I would think that it's the reverse, if I'm being honest. And I'm not a real estate agent, so I'm just going to throw that out there.
Okay.
I've never done this.
I love it.
But what I would say is, I guess I'm looking for the buyer's part is maybe it's my emotion that's keeping me from doing this because I'm scared to death of signing $1 million plus. And I need to put my logic into it, that logically I need to do this if this is what I want.
Okay, so you got the flip side of that, which is also the case, right? With certain people, right? We have some people that are too logical. They've got every spreadsheet from Redfin to Zillow to explaining why it shouldn't be this price. And those people will hit themselves over the head over and over again and miss house after house after house because they can't logically make sense on a calculator why I should be spending $200,000 more than list. Then we have the flip side. So you're absolutely right. Jody just didn't get there yet. You have the other side. No, it's okay. The other people are, I fall in love with this and I can't have a logical thought because I'm so over emotional on the other side. My job is to have a balance of bringing them to logic and emotion. When somebody is really caught up in emotion that they want or logic and they want to think about it, the question would be realistically, Christy, what is it that you want to think about? This is a 90% home and you said you love it and you want to write it. It's actually a 98 and you want to write about it. Now, I'm not telling you that you say, what is it that you want to think about to make her uncomfortable? But you might say to her, hey, Christy, help me understand a little bit so that I can help navigate our discussion because I don't want you to lose something that you really love. So what is it about this right now that you feel like you need to kind of think on or sleep on? You know what's going to happen, right? If she's got the money, she's got the credit score, it might just be fear. Mm-hmm. It might just be the fear of actually signing on the dotted line. Or it could be that she is in logic and she's saying, this doesn't make any sense. I don't want to overpay. When someone says they don't want to overpay in this market, my script to them is, I understand, right? Make sure you validate. You got to be that validator all the time. I understand how you feel. None of us want to spend more money than we think something's worth. And yet, you know where the value comes from, Christy? The other buyers that are competing for this house. So if you don't feel like competing is the right thing to do right now, then maybe we don't write an offer on the house. However, I just need you to understand that this is going to happen again. And it's going to happen again, and it's going to happen again. And I don't want you 4 months down the road, if prices go up even higher, to feel like you lost an opportunity. My job is to help you win the house, right? So I've got to help navigate that for her. You know what? When a house sells and it appraises, that means that's the value today, even though it doesn't feel like it should be. The other thing I need to explain to Christy is, Christy, when these people put the house on the market at 2.6, everybody knew this house would go for 2.850. So I don't want you to look at the list price as a real price. I want you to look at the list price as the bait on the fishing hook so that they could get as many bites and somebody would hook. So there's a lot of skill that goes into this kind of conversation because people are scared sometimes. And then other people are way off on the emotional end and they'll write, you know, I'll put 500,000 extra. I'll give you my kid, my dog, my hamster, my cat, whatever it is. I'll give you that as I can just get the house. So it's really about navigating all the craziness that this market produces. So let's say we get to the point where Christy says that she is ready to write the offer. What might be a question that she asks me? How much?
How much should
I
I
write.
offer?
Now, am I supposed to tell her how much? No, right? I'm not writing the check. What can I do though to help her?
Show her comps.
Yeah, I can look under writing right here. Establish a price range by showing her comps. I can talk to the listing agent, can I? Am I guaranteed I'm always going to get information from the listing agent? No, I can ask though, right? Can't hurt me to ask, where do I need to be? Is my client wasting her time if she writes at this place? I should fine tune the price. So here's where I go with this. So let's say it is a $2.5 million listing and I call Juan. And Juan says to me, well, Carl, you know what? I got to tell you, we have 40 people calling on this, and we already have offers in hand that are a couple 100,000 over. So if your client isn't even looking at 2.8 as a minimum price, don't waste your time writing because my client won't even look at it. Have you ever been told that before in a market?
Yes.
Okay. So I go back to Christy and I say, hey, Christy, I got some feedback from one, and one told me that, quite honestly, they have offers a couple 100,000 over asking. And we talked about this and you're like, okay, I get it. And I know we probably have to go there. Can I go at 2.8? Can I go at 2.8? Could she? If it's 2.5, she could, right? Yeah, absolutely. Let me ask you a question, Christy. And here's where I'm going to, last bullet at the bottom of the page. I need to get Christy to exhaust her reluctance, right? And I need her to use logic and emotion together in her decision. So here's where I'm going to start. I realize that 2.8 sounds like it's unrealistic, and yet we know that there's 30 potential packets of disclosures out and she's got 14 offers, whatever that is. So Christy, if we write it 2.8 tonight, will you kick yourself if I call Juan tomorrow morning and Juan tells me the house went for 2.825? So Christy has to think, right? We know the comps say that it would sell for anywhere between 2.8 and 2.9. So we're looking at 100,000 range. If Christy says, oh, Carl, I knew you were going to ask me this, I will kick myself because this is a perfect house. So I say to her, okay, Christy, then 2.825 is not the right price. So Christy, if you write it, she goes, okay, we'll write it 2.850. So Christy, if we write it 2.850 and one calls me tomorrow and tells me it went for 2.860, will you kick yourself for not writing it 2.860? And she sits there and she's hemming and hawing because she's dealing with this stress, right, of not knowing where to write. You know what? Why I'm doing this? I'm getting her to exhaust her reluctance, because if she writes lower than she really would have written and she doesn't get the house, whose fault is it? I don't mean really. Whose fault is it in the buyer's head?
Yours.
Yep. If I keep missing it, Carl, why didn't you tell me to go? Why didn't you encourage me to go high? Why didn't you push me to? You always told me that you have my best interest, right? So what I do now is the third question is, Christy, you know where I'm going with this. I'm not going to put a price on it. What is the price that when you put your head on the pillow tonight is the price where I get up tomorrow morning, and if it went higher, you're like, fine, let them have it. Let's move on to the next house. And Christy says, well, let me think about it. 2, 8, 7, 6, 9, and 99 cents. Okay, so we write the price. We write it at that price because I know that if one calls me tomorrow and says it went for 2.9, and I tell Christy, you know what, it went for 2.9, it's okay, right? We knew we weren't going to go over that price point, so let's move on. Is Christy okay with that?
Yeah.
Yeah, because it was her choice. It was her choice to go at that price point. Now I knew that I exhausted her reluctance. If she's still reluctant, she may go to a different price point. And if I don't do that battery of questioning with her, I'm not helping her to win that house. In fact, what I might be doing is avoiding a tense situation. My job, though, as a fiduciary, is to help her get the right price and the right terms for a house she can win. Now, here's the cool piece. If Juan calls me and says, hey, Carl, you had the best offer in terms, and I call Christy and I say, hey, Christy, guess what? Juan called me this morning and you got the house. Congratulations. What's the first thing Christy's going to say to me?
We could have got it for less.
Right. Did we overpay? I didn't want to overpay, right? So you know what I do? I don't even address it. You know what I say? Guess what, Christy? 30 offers. You won. I love it. You won the house. Congratulations. I will address it at some point. And if I can get the information, I could say you were 5,000 more or whatever it is, if I can get it. If I can't, though, what Christy needs to understand is that she won. She actually won the contention. She won the boxing match. So help her to realize she won, not that she had to be the highest bid. Because then I say this, okay, if you weren't the highest bid and you were second, would you have gotten the house, Christy? Nope. So aren't you glad you got the house? I've never had a client, ever had a client, other than when they first say that, come back and say, I wish we didn't win the house. Nobody ever has ever said that. So help Christy navigate that process. Here's how I do that, though. This is box 1, box 2, box 3, and then we can have dialogue or questions. When I sit down with Jeff, like I did earlier on, and I walked him through that, I draw this out for them, and you'll have this PowerPoint. I call it a box 1, box 2, box 3 script. Logic versus emotion. So you don't have to put all this in here, the verbiage is mine to you, but you are going to write these, you are going to graphically show the boxes. Oops. Okay, so I'll say, so this model actually helps the buyer discover where they are on the buying spectrum. So I'm going to ask questions so I understand Jeff's motivation. And I'm going to tell when I get to explain the market, because that's my area of expertise. And the rest of the time, I'm going to ask questions. Okay, so I'm going to say, Jody, so you want to buy a house, this is great. This is what I take every one of my buyers through, because I want to understand your motivation. There's 3 kinds of buyers right now in this market. Number 1, it's we'd like a house, but we're not in a rush. The second box buyer is we need a house and we don't want to get into a bidding war and overpay. And number 3, the third buyer right now is we need a house. We're ready to do whatever it takes to get it. We'll snow plow over somebody if necessary to get the house. That's a big range of buyers, correct? So Jody, where do you see yourself? Most people say 2, right? At least for starters. Okay, so let's say Jody picks 2. Pick 2, Jody.
I picked 2.
Okay.
I was gonna pick 3, but I'll pick 2.
Well, if you know the market, so you would have to pick 3 if you really were serious, right? Here's why I like that she picked 2 is I didn't have to try to put her in a box. She put herself in the box. So this is not on me, it's on her. So Jody, let me tell you a little bit about box 2 right now. And let me tell you what the market is like. We actually are in a box 3 market. And what that means is buyers that are in contention have the mindset that they're going to do whatever it takes to win. Now, what that means for you here is this. You can look at homes and you can stay in box 2, kind of like playing the soccer game in field 2 when the game is really being played in field 3. Now, I'm not saying that, Jody, sarcastically. What I'm trying to get you to understand is the market is hot right now, and it's a box 3 market. So let me ask you a question. I know you're in a box 2, don't want to overpay and get into a bidding war. However, if we found a 90% home, remember the 90% home thing we talked about earlier? If you found that house, would you be willing to jump into box 3 to get it if necessary?
Yes, if it's the right house.
If it's the right house. So what does that tell me? Does that tell me that there's a good shot that if Jody falls in love with a house, I can get her to be a box 3 buyer? Yes. Did I put her in either of those boxes? No, she put herself in there. All I did was navigate the discussion by asking her questions. Now, this is great because now I understand, I can help Jody understand what the market's all about when we go look at a house. And here's the great piece. I'm not putting her in a box. She put herself in the box. So if she says, no, I want to stay in box 2, I got a little bit of a dilemma because I know what's going to happen, right? I'm going to take her out. She's going to fall in love with house 3 or 6, and she's going to write an offer and she's not going to get it. And then next week, we're going to do it on the White House on the corner with the picket fence and roses, and she's not going to get it. Then the next is a ranch with a horse barn in the back, and she's not going to get it. And eventually she's going to say, Carl, you're not helping me get a house. Now I can sit down and I can say, well, you know what, Jody, let's revisit the consultation the day that we sat down. Remember how we talked about the markets? And you mentioned to me that you don't want to be in a place where you're in a bidding war. Has that changed at all? Or are you in the same space? Now, the lesson here is the lessons of not getting the house may have taught her a lesson. That means that she has to jump into box 3, whether she wants it or not, if she really wants a house. Or she might turn around and say, you know what, Carl, this is so not the market for me. Maybe we'll wait until October and see if anything changes. Is that okay too? It is okay. Now, our real estate sales agent mind says, no, I got to put them in a house. The reality, though, is if I have a pipeline of 10 buyers, is it okay for me to put Jody in October? Of course it is, because it's about Jody. It's not about me. That's the important piece of making sure that you're taking care of your clients correctly. However, box 1, box 2, box 3 allows Jody to tell me what the temperature is of her intent to buy. If she says, oh, Carl, ditch those box 1 and 2, I'm getting a house. I need a house. I'm coming from Boston. And if I don't get a house in 30 days, I'm not living on an apartment with 4 bulldogs, 3 cats, an elephant, and 2 snakes and a hamster. Not going to do it. Let alone my grandmother.
And I assume that also helps you to develop that pipeline and prioritize people and where you're going to spend your time and energy.
Yep. So I can go back now and say, I've got 10 box 1s. Those people see something every once in a while. They shoot me an email and say, oh, this is our dream home. And it's like, great. I know you're not interested in it right now until you really tell me you are. But I keep them on a touch system because eventually they might move to a box 2. What if the market changes though now and we have a buyer's market? Does the market change from box 3 to box 2 potentially? Yeah, if we have a lot of inventory, is it possible now that I can say to Jody, there's like 17 homes in the neighborhoods you're interested in? And let's go look at them. They've all been on the market for about 3 weeks. You're not in a hurry. This is a great opportunity for us to look at all of them, find everything you like. And depending on how motivated the buyer is for the house you actually like, we might be able to get you a great deal. That's a whole different perspective than give me everything you have, including your bumper, right? So that we can get you the house. Different market, different time, different dialogue. So if you guys list homes, this is the same dialogue you have with a seller in a buyer's market. It's just flipped, right? The seller thinks their house is the castle on the hill and they can get all the money in the world for their house. Meanwhile, the buyer isn't jumping all in saying, no, hang on here, right? So make sure your seller understands what box we're in too. Does that make sense? Because in a seller's market or in a buyer's market, the buyer actually wears the crown and the seller is just hoping that their product is good enough that they beat the other house out. And the way they do that is it's priced better, it's staged better, it's positioned or marketed better so that it can put the other homes out of business. And that's the line I always say, tell most sellers. What are we going to do to make sure that when we go on the market, we put your neighbor's house out of business? Because if you go higher, you're already not competitive. If you don't stage, you don't look as good as your neighbor. So what is it that we're going to do that's going to put your neighbor out of business when we list? Okay, so we talked a lot. Like, I didn't think we were going to cover this much time. We did, right? You got 3 or 4 slides. You'll get those slides. We got this recorded, I think, if you want it. That's great. If you have other questions, I put my number in the chat box so you can text me. Just tell me who you are so I know you're from the class. I always love it when people say, hey, Carl, and I'm like, hey, who are you? I don't know who you are, right? Any questions or dialogue around our conversation today?
Hey, I do want to bring something up, Carl, and this is to what you just said. This is something somebody invited me to all these real estate groups on Facebook, and I've had to leave some because it's just dramatic. But one of the things, it is shocking what's going on, but one of the things that I'm hearing a lot, especially if you're a buyer's agent and you're contacting a seller's agent, give as much detail as you can to that seller's agent, not just, hey, Carl, can you tell me more about that house on Smith Street?
Right.
Well, what do you want to know? I'm hearing that a lot because your call's probably not going to get returned because you didn't ask a good enough question. And if there's 17 other people that are looking at that same house that did take the time, they're probably going to get a return call or text.
Yeah, it's absolutely a great question because if I go to the bathroom and I come back and I've got 34 voicemails, I'm going to call the people that make my life easier, right? Now, I'm not saying that you don't want to take care of the client the way you should. However, human nature is going to be that I'm going to filter through something that I think is a lazy, unprofessional response, just like offers that people write that aren't on the right forms and they're not signed and all that kind of stuff, right? It's the stuff we all deal with from an ethical standpoint. I love that comment. Be the best. Be the best at every single thing you do in your business. In fact, when I coach, I always tell people, if you're not an A player, then you're not mastering your craft. If you go to bed at night and you think as a realtor, I'm kind of a C plus B player, the question I would say to you is, would you ever tell your client you think you're a C plus B player? Does your client expect an A player? How many of you would go to the dentist if the dentist said, well, I do about 60% of my fillings work, the other 40 aren't so good? I'd be out of that chair so fast and down the road. So if you said, well, I negotiate pretty good, but I'm kind of uncomfortable when it gets really uncomfortable, I'm not going to hire you to sell my house, right? Or you're a tax accountant. So master your craft. Be the very, very best that you can be. Yeah, other questions?
Nobody has any other questions? This is just, like I said, I'm not an agent, but sitting on these webinars this last year, I have learned a lot personally, and been able to ask some questions. And do you ever see people going from a 1 to a 3 where they're just kind of sitting on the sidelines? And that's, I feel like, a big jump. We're not in a rush, but let's say you do touch and you're like, hey, saw this come through. And the next thing you know, they're like, yeah, we have to have that.
So I love the question. So you know how sometimes you don't always get the truth from a client? Oh, we're not ready to sell yet. We're not ready to sell yet. And then I drive down the road and Malia's sign's in the ground. And I'm like, they told me they weren't ready to sell yet, because people don't always understand the dynamic of what's going on. And if I don't scuba dive and Malia scuba dived and got to the real root of the motivation, then she may have got them to go from 1 to 3. So my consultation, the questions I ask help people move back and forth from logic to emotion. Like, let's say you're a 1. And I say to you, Jody, what makes you ask the question, right? What makes you not in a rush today? Just curious. I'm not pressuring you. I just want to understand why you put yourself in box 1. Is that a fair question to ask her in a consultation? 100%. So what makes you pick box 1? Curious. So give me.
We're not no. I mean, we want to move at some point. We're thinking of starting a family.
Uh-huh.
We're just not sure yet what we want to do and where we want to go.
Okay. Do you have a timeline at all in your head where you would say we'd love to be in a house or a different house by X date?
Well, we're thinking of starting a family in the next year.
Okay.
Or we're thinking of retiring in the next year. Those are the things that I can
Wow.
think of. And
Those are 2 different, really different. I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
yeah, they are.
Just teasing.
But those are the things that I think motivate people to sell houses the most. But
Right.
you know, so you know, once we decide to start a family, we'll start looking. That way we can get settled before the baby comes.
Okay. Can I make a suggestion?
Sure.
Because I know how life things are, life changes and big life moments. They can come and go and they can change a lot, right? One thing we do know though is purchasing house is an investment in your equity, right? It's an investment in your future. What if we did this? And I'm never going to push you. I want you to know that that's not my MO, that's not my style. What if we went out and looked at some homes, figured out what it is that you could actually pay for on a home right now or what you'd be willing to spend so that you could understand what your price range is and what you could get for your money? Would that maybe help you see your future a little differently? For example, let's say that we go out next Saturday and you can buy a $1.8 million home, and all of a sudden you start seeing things that are like, oh, wow, I love this. Could it be that maybe the house actually becomes your first decision and not the baby?
Yeah, that would make sense.
I'm not going to push you. If you go out and we look and you say, yeah, this is great, I love it, we're still not ready, that's okay. And yet I don't want to rule out the opportunity that this might be a good time for you to make the move in anticipation of retiring or building a family. So why not throw that option in and let's just go look at them. Let's go spend a couple hours on Saturday looking at some homes. So,
you know, I feel like that would maybe move somebody from a 1 to a 2.
Yep. Well, yeah. So, okay. So great.
So I see
yeah.
this progression.
Yes.
That doesn't feel pressured. It doesn't make me feel ambulance chaser like.
Totally. Because I'm allowing you to play in the boxes, the sandboxes. I'm not putting you in a box. And if you say, you know what, Carl, it's really just, we feel like we have so much on our plate right now. That's not even, I don't even want to look at houses. I think it'll add confusion. Is that okay? It's perfect. You know what, Jody, no worries. You keep looking at the stuff that you're thinking of. And when it's time, we'll go. You know what happens sometimes? A week later, Jody calls and says, you know, the more we thought about it, the more we think we want to go look at houses. So I put something in her head to think about. Now, the question about can you go from 1 to 3? Usually what causes 1 to 3 and skipping over 2 is some life incident that causes you to need something. For example, your great great aunt in New Zealand just left you with 5 kids. You got to have a house now. So all of a sudden you call me and say, I'm taking my my nephews and nieces and I need to get something and I need to get it now. All of a sudden we've gone from 1 to 3.
Now, now this is an honest question and this is, I guess, for everybody, you know, did you guys see that with COVID? With now you've got 2 adults working from home and 2+ kids that used to share a room that are now homeschooling. So now you find that you have buyers that all of a sudden need more space.
Yeah. Yes. I don't know as if I see that the space thing so much as pent up interest in buying with rates so low right? And that kind of stuff. It's possible though, for somebody that's homeschooling may have that desire to make the move. In fact, we don't even know what happened, to be honest with you. We're all scratching our head wondering what in the world just happened this year. I mean, we have unprecedented amount of growth in sales in real estate, and it's still there, right? And while we might be seeing the market shift a little bit in certain spaces, right? Like on today's call this morning, people were talking about, the shifting. So I think a lot of it is on a as needed basis. What I do think is you're 100% right on the shift from 1 to 2 to 3. That kind of becomes the logical thing. In fact, when you get enlightened that you need the house and you call me, and you might put yourself in box 2 until I explain that we're in a box 3 market. And then you're like, oh, figures, right? When we want to buy a house, it has to be like this. Because, every buyer and seller wants to sell at the very top and wants to buy at the same time at the very bottom. And it just doesn't happen that way. Other comments or questions? Thoughts?
Carl, I have a question about when buyers want you to give them back some of your
My
commission
favorite topic.
in order for them to commit to working with you.
Right. Okay. So was this, who asked this? Alicia?
Cindy, Christy.
Christy.
Okay. So sorry, I'm trying to follow the boxes. So, so can we have the dialogue?
Uh-huh.
So Christy, this is great. I'm excited that you're looking. You can ask me when we have this conversation. So we're having our dialogue. So Christy, is there anything that we didn't cover in the consultation here before we go and take a look at some homes this weekend? I'm excited to work with you. I think we're gonna be a good match, and I think we're gonna find you something. We'll put a little pressure out there. It's box 3 market. We'll find you something though.
Yeah, there was one thing, Carl. I've talked to some other agents that I haven't committed to either, and they've offered to credit me some escrow closing costs out of their commission in order for me to commit sign a buyer broker agreement with them. Is that something you'd be willing to talk about?
Wow, and this is exactly the posture I take. Wow, really? You know what's interesting to me, Christy, about that? It's funny how when people, and I'm going to be very careful when I say this because I respect other agents and I respect our industry, but what makes me nervous about clients that ask for money, whether it's a seller or a buyer, and agents that offer it up before they even start working with you, is it's almost like they give their value away before they even have an opportunity to share their value as a professional with you. That really, it's almost like I'm dropping my paycheck because I need to have this job. I'm curious as to how you feel about that. Do you feel like you're going to get somebody that's going to negotiate for you at the highest level if they can't negotiate their own value?
Well, I mean, I'm just thinking we don't have a lot, we have a limited budget, and I'm just trying to, do the best I can to get into a house, and just wondering if we could work something out.
And I understand 100% that you feel that way, because as a homeowner, I'm in the same space you're at, right? Remember to validate. Is there something in the service that a real estate agent provides where you don't feel like I would earn my paycheck to feed my family, pay my mortgage, and take care of my kids?
No, I'm just saying.
At this point, guys, we have nothing to lose, right?
Right.
I have zero to lose at this point, in my opinion.
Right. No, I'm just, because other agents have offered me that. That's the only reason I bring it up.
Right. So, Chrissy, the reason why I bring it up like this is because I work my tail off for my clients. I really do. I work really hard. I work long hours, especially in this market. And just like you you have a pressing need to make sure that your finances work. I go to work every day to take care of my family. And so typically I'm not in a position where I give part of my paycheck away. Have you ever been in a situation where your employer asked that of you? I don't care, you know, guys, I want to time out for a second. I don't care if it gets this uncomfortable. I really don't, because I'm going to get up and leave in a minute if she doesn't understand it. So let's go ahead and, right, we have the diet. Has your employer ever asked you to kick back?
Well, no, but that's kind of a different story.
Except you're my employer, right? When you hire me,
It's,
right, to work
it's
with
the
you,
same thing.
I'm going to show you value, and this is how I make my living. So Christy, here's where my head's at with it. I don't make a habit of doing that. I'd be happy to pay for your home inspection, right? Or a carpet cleaning or whatever it is, right? That you might concede to. We've all done that before. However, I'm not in the camp of sharing my commission with you. I would really be happy to help you with something that makes sense, inspections or something. However, I'm not really in a place where I'm comfortable giving you a quarter of my commission or half of my commission. However, you know what? And then I get up. This is my dramatic exit. I get up and I'm like, hey, Christy, here's my card, right? Unfortunately, we're not a match. And I'll just shake your hand. And you know how many times people say, no, sit down. I'm not saying I don't want to work with you. I just thought I'd ask.
Well, let me tell you my experience. I had a couple ask me that, and you know, I said the same thing. I said, you know, I only get paid when we close escrow, and the rest of the time I'm pretty much working for free, and that's my paycheck. Would you give me, you know, would you give me part of your paycheck? Would that be fair for me to ask that of you? We ended up getting into contract. They acquiesced and said, you know, they wanted to work with me. It was the most nightmare transaction I've ever had. The whole thing, we ended up falling out of contract. So yeah, even I think when someone asked me that now, I don't even think I want to touch it.
Yeah, I don't want to go there because, you know, and I know some people will say, well, you know, I'm going to turn business down. The only thing I don't like about it is I get it and I understand it, but then we start to set a standard for our industry that we're discounters. And I don't want to be a discounter. And if I have enough pipeline, I don't have to work with people I don't want to work with. If I'm not lead generating though, and I'm not focused on building my pipeline with quality people, I don't get to pick who I work with. I have to work with the people that are there because I have to pay an electric bill and I need to make a mortgage payment. Does that make sense? But if I have a pipeline because I lead generate, I don't have to pick somebody where I make less money. And when I make that dramatic exit, that's kind of how I might address Christy and say, hey, Christy, you know, I got to tell you, I have another client, Alicia, and I work with Alicia, and Alicia hasn't asked me for a dime. And quite honestly, I work my tail off for Alicia. And in the end, I'll get paid what I actually earned working with Alicia, and I'm not going to get paid what I deserve working with you. So I love you to pieces, and here's my card, and we're just not a match.
Perfect.
Bye.
Thank you.
Right. Alicia, how do you respond to people who quote the discount brokerages as a reason to ask you to lower your commission? Is there a way we can show them in a chart? Yeah, you probably can. And there might be some, there probably isn't anything we can get through the board. I don't know how to do that because how people end up paying is the brokerage owns the listings and such. I'll tell you what I do on the listing end. When people say they list with Redfin, they list with this one, and I'm sorry, I'm using brands. Jody, you can tell me to shut up if you want, but I know there are discount brokerages. Let me just say that. What I always say is, how many of those 4 discount brokerages did you just name that you see signs all over the yards? And people will say, well, not very often. And I'll be like, why do you suppose that is if that's such a deal? Right? So, and then I go into the line, if it's listing, let me ask you a question. Alicia, have you ever had a time where you've had to have surgery or elbow surgery or anything? Did you go to the doctor who does it for half price in their basement to save money, or do you go to Stanford and pay top dollar and have it right? Well, if done right, well, of course you went to Stanford. And even though you paid more, you knew when you went to Stanford that you were getting the very, very, very best available. And that's what I offer you. And you know what? Even though this is not your elbow or your knee, this is the single most important asset that you own, more than likely. So Alicia, why in the world would we want to skimp on the value? And we can learn by pulling up the statistics that the greater percentage of homes sold are by traditional brokers.
You know, something else I actually heard on a YPN call, and this is something you can do yourself. So create your own chart, if you will. And when you go into a buyer or a seller presentation, you're probably going to tell them, this is what I'm going to do for you
Yes.
to help sell your house. Here's how I'm going to market it. Here's how I do this. Here, show them all the things that you're going to do for them. And then now you have your own portfolio put together and say, and when you went to the discount brokerage, what were they going to do for you? And then ask your client to compare. Were they going to take you out? Were they going to send you things? Were they going to do X, Y, and Z for you? And there's, you know, all these classes about defending your commission and things like that. And it's just by showing them, this is what I'm going to do. I'm a person. I'm not a person, a robot.
I love that, Jody. You know, and I take that, and when I'm sitting with a seller in particular, I'll take this and I write down like what I do. And when somebody wants the discount, I'll say, okay, which one of the items you want me to take off the list? And of course, they don't want you to take anything off the list. And I'm like, well, of course, because I'm a full service realtor. And you want full service, right?
You know, but in this market, though, we're coming up against, at least I have with a really good friend. Well, Christy, you know, Ryan will list it for 1%. And my daughter went to high school with him and she really wants me to use him.
Yep.
And, you know, in this market, really, you don't need to do much because it's not like you even need to really stage it that well or take great pictures because it's going to sell in the first week anyway for top dollar. I know that. So why would I pay you a percentage? You know, why would I pay 4% more when Ryan's going to, you know, sell it for 2.5, whatever, no, 1.5, whatever. So what do you say to that?
So here's the deal. What is Ryan going to do for you, Christy?
He's gonna, you know, he's gonna take like professional photography, and he's gonna,
and I write it down.
Pardon me. He's gonna schedule the showings.
Okay.
And he's gonna help me kind of stage my furniture with, you know, kind of declutter that type of, show me what to do as far as decluttering, that type of thing.
Great. Who's going to negotiate when the offers come in? Because you're going to probably get 20, 30 offers, maybe 15 offers, depending on how well your home shows and how well it's priced. Who's going to do all the negotiating for you?
Well, Ryan, that's what he gets his 1% for.
Got it. Who's going to do all the paperwork for you when it goes into escrow?
Ryan, that's his job, you know.
Got it. Okay. Who's going to make sure that the inspections are done and the disclosures are done correctly and all the paperwork is followed through legally, et cetera?
Ryan.
And who puts the house on the MLS?
Ryan.
Oh, so Christy, let me ask you a quick question. Do you know how we get paid as agents? So I don't want to make Christy feel bad. I just want to be real matter of fact with her though, right?
I'm paying you. As the seller, I'm paying the commission out of my proceeds, and I need as much money as I can out of this sale. It's probably going to be the last time I sell a house and make a purchase. So
I get it 100%. So how's Ryan paid?
Ryan's paid through my commission.
Okay. Ryan doesn't get paid until the house closes, right?
Right.
So if Ryan is paid 1.5%, okay, let me just explain how it works for us as realtors. And it works the same way for Ryan, because most of us are pretty much the same brokerages out there. So let's just say Ryan is making 1% or whatever it is. That means that Ryan's making, let's just come up with a number. He's going to get paid $15,000 on this house or $10,000 on this house. Okay. Ryan probably pays somewhere between 20%, maybe 30% to his brokerage house, right? Out of that. And let's just say it's 20%. How much does that leave, Ryan?
8,000.
Okay. And Ryan probably has to pay somewhere between maybe 30% or so in taxes, and then maybe 15% to Uncle Sam or Uncle California. So that's probably like about 45% in taxes. So how much does that leave him roughly?
$4,500, something like that.
Okay, $4,500. And then Ryan has to pay for the photography, right?
Mhm.
Staging and whatever other things he's going to do for you. So let's just say he spends $1,000 out of that, right,
Mhm.
Christy? So now he's down to $3,500. And you think there's any other expenses that Ryan might have with selling your house?
Not really that I can think of. I have to pay for the inspections and
Okay. Yeah. Ryan puts in a lot of time, right? You think Ryan puts 40 hours in, 50 hours in, 60 hours with all the
I don't even think he puts in that much because it's like I said, there's not really much to do. You just kind of put the house on the MLS.
Yeah, let me tell you though, when the house actually goes into escrow, the bulk of the work starts to happen when we're tracking paper and keeping you safe from a legal position and making sure things are done on time, tracking down the buyer's agent to make sure that the agent is on time with there's a lot that you don't see that goes into it. And I'm just telling you that. So let's just say for the sake of argument that Ryan puts in 60 hours of total dedication from start to finish. If I divide that out, Ryan's making $58 an hour. Okay. Now, do you realize that Ryan has to take some of this money home and pay for his own expenses? For his
No.
family, for his own family, right? Because
Oh,
I'm
right.
assuming that you know that Ryan works for a living, right?
Right.
So how much of that money after? So if Ryan takes $3,500 home for your transaction,
Hmm.
and Ryan does this with his sales, with all of his sellers, and Ryan has let's just say that Ryan's got some bills that come up and Ryan needs to pay a back tax bill, or Ryan has a house payment that's due and he doesn't have as many listings. Do you think Ryan's out of that $3,500? Do you think Ryan is going to put more money against marketing your home, or do you think Ryan is going to use it to pay his bills?
Probably pay his bills.
So what do you end up paying Ryan for then if Ryan takes the money that might otherwise go to marketing your home or taking care of you, which is the client? I mean, would you go to work for all that time for $3,500? So I guess the question I'm asking you, Christy, is I understand the bottom line is important to you. What if, though, you hired a real estate agent that could negotiate a higher price on your home from a skilled negotiation standpoint, rather than cutting $6,000 or $7,000 or $10,000 or $15,000 off the bottom? Let me explain if I can. And I use this as an example. When I worked for Colgate Palmolive and I worked for SC Johnson, do you know we hired companies hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars to negotiate our contracts? We didn't have our CEO negotiate contracts. We didn't have the director of marketing negotiate contracts. We actually hired professional executive negotiators, and we paid hundreds of thousands of dollars to do that. Now, if somebody's not being paid to negotiate, in fact, you're actually dipping into their pocket, what amount of effort and service are you really going to get? Because I realize that houses will sell in today's market. You're 100% correct. The question is Ryan motivated to negotiate the very, very best deal for you, putting even more time in in analyzing the 12 offers, the 15 offers, and negotiating for your very best interest, if in fact he's going to make $3,000?
Well, I think he just does, it's the volume of transaction. He gets a lot of listings because, you know, he's reasonably priced.
Right. So he gets to work 5 times harder to make a lot less money. So Christy, it's up to you. Here's what I do know about this industry. You know, the adage, you get what you pay for. In the end, Ryan has to take care of himself and his family. And I don't know why he lists at that price point. What I do know, though, is generally people that have to buy their value through price aren't necessarily top of the line in terms of service and what they offer you, right? Because otherwise they would be selling their value.
Good.
Why?
I like, yeah, that's true.
Sell your value, right? I mean, if I can't, is there ever a time, Christy, where you went into a store and you were hemming and hawing over buying something that was the brand, and it was 30% more expensive than the off brand, and you bought the off brand to save the 30% only to be disappointed that you didn't in fact buy the brand?
Sure.
You know, there's times a lot like that time, right? You could be looking to save money and cut edges, just save some money on the bottom line, when in fact you should probably be investing the best possible solution to sell your home at the highest possible price, not worrying about whether the agent feels like they're getting stuck, right? I will never feel like I'm not earning my keep with you, because I'm going to give you 110, 200% no matter what. My bills come in, my value is there, right? And I will negotiate top dollar for you. It's not all about what you can save on the bottom. Oftentimes it's what you can negotiate at the top. Just my perspective. And if you feel like 1% is where you want to go, I get up. This card, and it was great meeting you. We're not a match.
No,
my value, you know, I love it, is my value is not always in price. My value is in what I deliver, right?
yeah, and I even put it back on her because this was a really good friend of mine that I've been, you know, talking about selling her house for a long time. And she's a controller for a major corporation. And I'm like, you know, ethically, people that discount their services, it's the same as if, you know, we're all trying to make a living here. And would you work for blah, blah, blah percent of your current salary and still do, you know, your job as well as you do right now?
Yeah, and again, the question I always ask is, does it ever make you wonder why the people that list for 1% while the rest of us are out there listing at regular commission, and we're doing more business in most cases?
Mm-hmm.
Now, it's not always the case. However, I will say that you can look at a lot of top agents and they're closing 20, 30, 40, 50 homes at regular commission. Does it ever make you wonder, Christy, why these people have to sell themselves at 1.5%? It would make me worried that somebody can't sell themselves at regular commission price. It would make me very nervous having somebody in the living room that was buying my business through commission, not through value. And there's a big difference, right, between value and price.
Very well said.
In the absence of value, and I use this expression, in the absence of value, money matters. If you offer value, people will pay for value. We see it every day of the week. Lululemon is the second highest dollar per square foot retailer in the world. Apple is number 1. And you know what? My daughter lives in Lululemon, and you can go into Lululemon and buy these black pants that stretch, and they look just like the ones you buy in Macy's. And I can't tell the difference, and they're 3 times more expensive, but they got that logo on them. Oh, yes, they do, right? And people will pay for it, right? Because there is something to be said about that brand. So, you know, that's all I can tell you. Chrissy, if you want to really